This global announcement comes all the way from Tokyo, Japan, and a legendary game developer. He's working on an ambitious new project, and we are honored he chose TGA as the place to share the first details and in-engine footage with the world.
On December 11th, 2025 aired Jeff Keighley's The Game Awards, a set of commercials that we are annually glued to for some reason. During said commercial break, Nagoshi Studio has finally unveiled the project they've been working on for 5 years. Gang of Dragon, an action-oriented crime drama influenced heavily by Sleeping Dogs and Yakuza. The team was aiming to make an impact on the rest of the industry. However, on March 7th, two Bloomberg journalists, whose names I will not mispronounce, came out with an article reporting that the parent company of Nagoshi Studio, NetEase, will no longer continue to pay the bills, leaving the studio in a tough spot. According to an anonymous source, the studio needs roughly $44.5 million to finish the project exactly as they wanted. This story left some pretty significant impact on the industry. So much so that beloved game directors have stated their opinions on this. I saw people completely out of the loop on Yakuza and who Nagoshi is discussing this matter. Unfortunately, every other day I'm forced to read some very obvious misinformation that gets absolutely no pushback. If everyone else is saying this, then it must be true. This is also true for many content creators. For instance, anyone who did more research than just reading one article knows what the 45 million is actually for. Bloomberg themselves wrote about this a whole year prior, and it's been sitting there in plain sight. All of the speculation surrounding this number comes from the lack of care to learn more. So, in today's flimsy rant, I want to give you some proper context for the situation so you won't be so easily lied to in the future. I will tell you about the circumstances of Nagoshi Studio's creation, what the background of NetEase Games is, and most importantly, what was $45 million actually for. There will also be a lot of opinions. This was supposed to be a quick slop video, and then I learned too much. On October 8, 2021, the news hit the media that Toshihiro Nagoshi, a legendary Japanese video game producer, had left Sega. Nagoshi was responsible for many certified ONG classics, as well as pushing through a tiny little game known as Yakuza. He gambled his position at Sega, putting all of his credibility into this new and risky project that actually kickstarted one of Sega's most valuable franchises today. Alongside him, Daisuke Sato was leaving as well, a general producer at Ryuga Gotoku Studio, most notable for his work as the director of Yakuza 3. Later we learned that this drastic decision was caused by Sega putting a lot of pressure on Nagoshi. They wanted him to join the CEO board of directors at the company, moving up from the game-making division to the money-making division, which he wasn't happy with. He still wanted to work on art, hence the departure. This 2021 severance was seemingly on good terms at first, even leaving a nicely worded letter from key Ryuga Gotoku Studio figures. However, it quickly turned sour. RGG's last project with Nagoshi and Sato still on board, Kaito Files, had their names removed from the credits. You could argue that at the end of the day the project was delivered without them on the team, as they left halfway through the development, but soon we learned that this was only the beginning. Their names have been also later scraped from re-releases of older titles. This includes Yakuza 3, the game Daisuke Sato directed. Many of these roles have been given to other people who remained at the company. GOG releases in particular removed a ton of staff from the credits, including people at Lab 42 and QLog, who ported these games to PC to begin with. An Estonian game developer noticed these oddities and then posted them on Reddit. Someone at Sega purposefully edited the code so that the credits for outsourced work don't pop up at the title screen. This Reddit thread is how some of the people left out of the credits found out about it, and they did feel betrayed. Although the corporation side of Sega did burn a lot of bridges with its past employees, RGG itself doesn't seem hostile towards Nagoshi or Sato at all. In early 2022, Masayoshi Yokoyama, the current head of Ryuga Gotoku Studio, has made one joke about Nagoshi, and that's kind of it.
なんかどうですかって代表になってから何か変わられましたかとかね変わんないよね何もね使える経費が増えたぐらいだよなだからそう
Is he flexing that the executives like him more? What? When in early 2026, Yakuza fans began harassing Yokoyama online for a decline in quality of his projects, Nagoshi stood in defense of his ex-colleagues, even calling them friends. From an outside perspective, it looks like there is no bad blood there. After the departure from Sega, Toshihiro Nagoshi and Daisuke Sato founded Nagoshi Studio under NetEase, a mobile game industry conglomerate that has worked in the past with names as big as Blizzard, Marvel, fucking Warner Bros. They haven't published many story-driven single-player games before, but the same year that Nagoshi Studio was founded, they also acquired Grasshopper Manufacture, a team of absolute legends. It looked like NetEase was trying to expand their role in the single-player market. For years there was no word on Nagoshi Studio's project, just that the team is working on it, and that there might be some involvement with Ma Dong-seok, an American South Korean action movie star. After 4 years of development came the 2025 Game Awards, hosted by the one and only Jeff Keighley and his stupid fucking shoes. We finally saw the trailer for Gang of Dragon. And then everything else happened. So on March 7th, 2026, we learned that NetEase, the parent company of Nagoshi Studio, is pulling out its funding. But who exactly is NetEase? NetEase is a mobile game industry conglomerate who, like other billion-dollar companies, has a pretty questionable past. Just typing their name into google.com will bring you quickly to a Securities and Exchange Commission page about a 2006 investigation regarding overstating the company's revenues and understating its losses. SEC alleged falsifying company's records related to hundreds of contracts. Oh. Moreover, their track record of supporting studios they buy is far from acceptable. Many times straight up abandoning teams of developers. Even Marvel Rivals just barely came out, as the CEO allegedly pitched to designers replacing beloved characters like Wolverine with OCs to cut down on production cost. That way they would have to pay less for licensing fees. Ah yes, the NetEase original character, the Clawman. So why did Nagoshi decide to build this new studio under NetEase so confidently? What most people don't really talk about is that Nagoshi wasn't actually just offered a big bag of yen, like many of you say so. Both NetEase and Tencent competed for him. Tencent being a company owning Riot Games and a significant amount of shares in Epic Games. With this in mind, I can imagine why he thought that the classic NetEase pullout wouldn't happen to him. Some of the biggest names in the industry have been duking it out specifically for him. Although NetEase fought for Nagoshi Studio, no one is actually safe from CEOs. Since the beginning of 2023, the layoffs began. To maximize profit despite multiple worldwide hits, the company started slashing jobs, including key figures overseeing studios NetEase just bought or created, like Nagoshi Studio. In 2024, the CEO reportedly replaced studio supervisors with university graduates in their 20s with absolutely no field experience whatsoever. Damn, I wonder why he did that. So the people in charge of, among the other things, Nagoshi's budget were fired and replaced with 20-year-olds that still have to show their IDs whenever they are buying alcohol. Reportedly, this new board began immediately defunding studios NetEase owned. On the off chance the college grads found a project worthy of investment, the CEO would chime in and cancel it anyways, like what happened with Oka Studio. The people we own are working on a game for a different publisher? And we agreed to that? Fire them all. Shortly after the start of 2025, Nagoshi was told that the finance people have already decided about his fate. The studio will not be granted any more money or time. Additionally, Nagoshi Studio will not be contracted for any future projects with NetEase. Once Gang of Dragon is finished, they are dropping them. That's it. So, a whole year before Nagoshi requested additional funds, he already knew that that wasn't going to happen. So it's all his fault, right? Or the other people in charge of the studio. How could a game escalate to such a ridiculous degree? What was the 45 million for? There was also one more note. One very important note. But first you need to understand properly how do projects grow out of proportion, just so you can understand how insane this note actually is. Let's talk about game development cost. Through opinion regurgitation sites like Twitter or Reddit, you probably heard that Nagoshi Studio was given a $40 million budget. And after 5 years of development, Nagoshi dared to ask for another 45 million. The narrative is that NetEase rightfully dropped Gang of Dragon as it was dead in the water. It completely blew out of proportion with no results to speak of. That the studio was doing nothing but burning through money for the last 5 years, and they simply invested cash where they shouldn't, like hiring celebrities to star in the game. First of all, the $40 million budget is a lie. No journalist or NetEase representative ever gave us a real number. This is a rumor made up by Yakuza fans and it's currently treated as a fact. If everyone is saying this, then it must be true. Not a single person who perpetuated this lie forward actually bothered to double check if what they're saying is true. However, according to Bloomberg, Nagoshi Studio does need $45 million to complete the project. To understand this situation further, a reasonable question to ask would be, how much game development costs? Nothing anyone in these comments ever bothered to ask themselves. Well, These are the two basic things you need to know. 1. With each generation of consoles, the production cost goes up. This is because new technology allows for more possibilities to take advantage of, which requires more staff, which requires more money. One of the most infamous examples of this is Devil May Cry 4, a PlayStation 3 game which was given a PlayStation 2 budget by Capcom. This quickly turned out to be not nearly enough money, and the team was forced to scale down significantly.
We calculated everything down to the last detail, and sure, there were some aspects that dissatisfied the players, the fact that you had to traverse back over previous levels during the latter half of the game. Well, it turns out the budget was similar to what we had on Devil May Cry 3. Creating the game in the same way would have meant we would have run out of budget, and also we wouldn't have been able to ship in time.
By run out of time, he doesn't mean that they would have to delay the game. By run out of time, he means before the money runs out. What's important to note is that since the beginning of Nagoshi Studios and Gang of Dragons' existence, we have jumped a generation of consoles, crossing PS4 and its 5.5 GB of RAM out of the question. More possibilities at the cost of money. 2. Production cost per month goes up the closer you are to the release of the game. This is influenced by many factors. During initial stages of production, you typically have only a couple of people working on it, laying down the foundation for others to build off of. But what's also important to the game and to the budget is marketing. For people to buy your game, you need the folk to know about it, and marketing is what you typically start investing into in the latter half of development, if not the last third. Creating a good and memorable trailer is not as simple as pressing the record button when playing the game, chopping it up and calling it a day. You need a director, a writer, an editor, a capture artist to actually record the footage, a composer to do the music, a sound designer, a sound mixer, people handling all the motion graphics, and then at the end of the day, pay to show your trailer. By my calculations, which are based on that one Kotaku article, just showing the Gang of Dragon trailer on the Game Awards was an investment of $600,000. Now, a theoretical 5-minute gameplay trailer would be Then think about all the short-form trailers, advertisements on gaming websites, sponsored Twitch streams, TV commercials, Fortnite collabs, billboards, AI girlfriends telling you about the greatest video game ever made, Gang of Dragon. Even way back in the 90s, publishers were spending tens of millions of dollars on marketing alone. Final Fantasy, way back in the day when they were still seen as competition to Atlas, had spent 45 million on just marketing for a single platform video game. I am bringing up this specific example for no reason whatsoever. Just to be clear, this amount of spending on advertisement is not exclusive to AAA. Even beginner indie developers are recommended to allocate 40% of their total budget into the marketing, as unless you're somehow making the next Hollow Knight or Balatro, you're gonna need it. In 2025 alone, over 20,000 games were released on Steam. That's at least 50 a day, I think. All of this stuff has to be paid for while still making the game. That all adds up to a lot, making the latter half of development much more expensive. Considering the fact that Gang of Dragon was beginning its marketing campaign, we can safely assume that it was entering this final stage of development. I'm by no means saying that the $45 million still needed to ship the game is nothing to scoff at. I'm not brushing it off. However, if Gang of Dragon was supposed to rival the likes of Watch Dogs, then this is not an extreme case. If we assume that the amount said by our Twitter experts is true, 40 plus 45, this still would be the 65th most expensive game of all time, right below Gears of War Judgment, a game you probably didn't remember until I mentioned it. For months there's been discussion acting like Gang of Dragon became this elusive project that completely blew out of proportion, but in the place we call reality, that's not really the case. The total of $85 million would be the standard, if not below average, for an open world crime drama of this scope. This amount is more than reasonable considering that some key figures on the team have also worked on a much more expensive title on the list. A title that has become a cult classic since. What about Gang's marketing budget, you may ask? Oh, I can't wait to get into that. Okay, now that you have more knowledge, what was this 45 million actually for? I referenced many times that the answer was out there in the open since 2025. Now that you understand a little bit more about game development, what can affect its cost, how crucial the marketing is to the game's success, and how expensive it is, let's talk about the very obvious twist. Do you remember me talking about NetEase reportedly reducing expenses by mass layoffs and cutting budgets for studios they owned? At the beginning of 2025, Nagoshi Studio was told that they won't be receiving any additional funds and that once Gang of Dragons production wraps up, NetEase will no longer be supporting them. There was also one more note. One detrimental note. NetEase has entirely backed out of investing into Gang of Dragons marketing campaign. Entirely! Not a single fucking dime. Do you remember the whole previous chapter of me explaining to you how important and expensive marketing is? That it costs as much as the game itself? Toshihiro Nagoshi was told 3.5 years into the production that he actually won't be getting a single dollar for it. Hope you saved up a couple of dozen million, buddy! On this note, dear Leon, did you read the whole paragraph that you showed in your video? Let me show it to you. Just zoom out and oh! Doing any kind of research on game development will prove that this footnote is not something you just glance over. Top comments under your video are speculating on where did the money go? Essentially, as I understand this, NetEase wasn't able to entirely drop Nagoshi Studio due to either agreements or very bad press. However, by refusing to advertise the game they are publishing, NetEase put the studio into a financial chokehold. Either they would have to stop the development entirely and put all the money they still have left into marketing, or continue working on the game, making sure that it's actually finished, praying that a different investor might pick it up, which might have been what happened. You might say that this situation is similar to Devil May Cry 4, as Gang of Dragons marketing campaign would probably cost around the half of the total thing. In reality, it's much worse. In DMC4's case, they realized their budgetary constraints very early on and worked around it. On the other hand, Nagoshi Studio was informed about not receiving any marketing funding just a few months before beginning the marketing campaign. Should I remind you that according to the statement put out by NetEase, Gang of Dragon was planned to come out between March and May of 2026. These fuckers gave the studio nearly a year to adapt. Because of how modern game production pipelines look like with so many people involved, there was no way to scale down. No studio would be able to adjust to a decision this drastic made this late. This knowledge makes all of the discourse surrounding Gang of Dragon disappointing and painful to read. Hundreds of theories about how Nagoshi is actually a deluded narcissist, that the project clearly must have blown out of scale, that he actually didn't leave Sega because of the amount of pressure put on him, but because Sega was actually in the middle of demoting him for calling someone a nerd at a video game tournament. That the clearly unfinished HUD, something that respectfully can be done in 2 days, proves that Gang of Dragon was always a fake game. Now, Occam's razor. Tell me what's more likely. Gang of Dragon received only one very short trailer because it's a fake game that never existed, or because trailers cost money per second of runtime and they had none of that money. And of course, all the misinformation about the money. Also, in those screenshots you can clearly see Unreal Engine pissing and shitting itself, as well as the world famous yellow paint, which means that this stage has been through playtests. This game is real. This moronic behavior stemming from not bothering to fact check what you're saying or reading any articles about the story spread so far in fact that there are dozens of posts with hundreds of endorsements stating that NetEase rightfully dropped Nagoshi Studio. I can't blame NetEase for this one. I guess if you're too lazy to Google the topic even once, then you might actually come to a conclusion like this. Thanks to what the conversation became, the blame was successfully put fully on the studio and not the people who reportedly set them up for failure a year in advance. Baseless rumors spread so far that they became facts in people's minds. If everyone is saying this, then it must be true. That's sad. If you think Yakuza fans convincing themselves into collectively believing lies they made is the worst, then you clearly haven't entered the worst possible place. Short-form content. Classic Man D is a predominantly YouTube Shorts creator with over 1 million subscribers, and his video about Gang of Dragons cancellation is the most viewed video on this matter, currently sitting at 700k. Let me play it for you.
Bro, why is it that the concept of finish your game before you announce it just so goddamn foreign now? People, I'm just me. I don't know anything about game development or anything of that nature when it comes down to these studios. People, can I not ask the question, the simple question of how the freaknik do you make a game and then not know you need $44 million more to finish it? And the game looks damn near finished. What else needs to be done? 44 million for actual what? I really want to know.
This is insulting. There are hundreds of losers like this who ask themselves a basic question, and then instead of actually looking up the answer, they narcissistically choose to use it for their own narratives. Just to, at the end of the day, call the project a waste of time. In the comments you can see people confidently spouting the same lies as before. They don't know the answer and they don't need to know it. They make up answers to be what they want them to be. If I can ask one thing from you, is that whenever you happen to see people spreading these made up stories, call them out. Apply some much needed pushback. None of this can be entirely undone, but let's at least stop it from spreading further. What kept on bugging me regarding Gang of Dragon was the fact that despite having no marketing budget, they still put out a trailer on one of the most expensive venues of them all. They knew that NetEase was going to drop them, so why bother? After all, they had to foot the bill from the development fund. To answer that, let's go back to 2005. Development of the original Yakuza was very difficult, increasing the budget several times or conflicts with Zero, the age rating company. There were multiple points where the game was completely dead in its tracks, and yet it somehow kept going. A story-driven console game for adults was not considered viable at the time, so Nagoshi put his whole career on the line to get it out there, and at the end of the day, the art persevered. Nagoshi and his team at Amusement Vision kept on proving people wrong. I see the 2025 Game Awards trailer as their attempt at proving themselves. This was a way of showing their work to the world. They had a competent team with a clear direction. From what we know, Nagoshi did not secure any deals. No investor decided to buy out the studio from NetEase, even though the NetEase people are happy to talk about the price. Different investors picking it up is not entirely out of the question, as companies like Nintendo have a habit of offering funding to dying studios in exchange for exclusivity deals. It doesn't always end up well, but presumably Gang of Dragon was nearing the end of its production. Development was supposed to be ongoing till March 2026 after all. What really bums me out is that, let's be real, a potential investor would look at the situation before moving forward with a deal. No matter if it's doing it themselves, asking someone else to do it for them, or putting a prompt into ChatGPT, what would spring up first about Nagoshi Studio is the stuff with the most engagement, also known as the made-up bullshit, a version of the story so warped that the victims became the culprits. Does Nagoshi Studio have any positive PR left? Not really, and it's thanks to the fans. Although NetEase left the studio to starve, consumers were the ones to put the final nail in the coffin. The fans were the ones who called it a deserved end, a waste of time.